Long before there were universities or research laboratories, long before the scientific method or peer-reviewed journals, human beings were already experts on animal behavior. They had to be. Their survival depended on it. Imagine a group of early humans, perhaps in what we now call France, some 35,000 years ago. They lived in intimate connection with the natural world in ways that are almost impossible for us to comprehend today. They knew which plants were safe to eat and which would bring sickness or death. They knew the migration patterns of the great herds that thundered across the ancient plains. And they knew the animals themselves, their habits, their fears, their cleverness. We know this because they left us evidence, painted on the walls of caves in ochre and charcoal and manganese oxide. The caves of Lascaux, Chauvet, and Altamira contain some of the most breathtaking art ever created by human hands. And what did our ancestors choose to paint, again and again, with such skill and devotion? Animals. Horses with flowing manes, captured mid-gallop. Bison with heads lowered, muscles tensed for battle. Lions with their mouths open, teeth gleaming in the flickering torchlight. Bears, deer, aurochs, mammoths. The caves are a menagerie of creatures rendered with astonishing accuracy and emotional depth. But these were not mere illustrations. Scholars believe these paintings served spiritual purposes, that they represented a worldview in which the boundary between human and animal was far more permeable than we might imagine today. Many indigenous cultures around the world developed animistic beliefs, the idea that animals possess spirits, souls, or minds much like our own. Some even believed that humans and animals could transform into one another, that the line between species was not a wall but a doorway. In ancient Egypt, animals were not merely respected but worshipped. The cat goddess Batet was believed to protect homes and families. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom and writing, was associated with sacred birds who were mummified by the thousands. The Egyptians observed animals with careful attention and saw in them qualities worthy of divine status. Meanwhile, in ancient Greece, philosophers began asking more systematic questions about the nature of animal minds. Aristotle, that tireless observer of the natural world, spent years studying animals and organizing them into categories. He dissected creatures, observed their behaviors, and pondered their inner lives. In his work, History of Animals, he wrote extensively about animal intelligence, noting that many creatures displayed what he called practical wisdom. Aristotle believed that animals had souls, though he distinguished between different types of souls. Plants had a nutritive soul, concerned only with growth and reproduction. Animals had a sensitive soul, capable of perception and movement. And humans alone possessed a rational soul capable of abstract thought and reason. This hierarchy would prove enormously influential. It placed humans at the top of a great chain of being, with other creatures arranged beneath us in descending order of mental complexity. It was a comforting idea, perhaps one that assured us of our special place in the cosmos. But it also contained the seeds of a troubling assumption that animal minds, whatever they might be, were fundamentally lesser than our own. Not everyone agreed. The philosopher Pythagoras, famous for his mathematical theorem, believed in the transmigration of souls. The idea that after death, a human soul might be reborn in an animal body and vice versa. If this were true, then the pig you passed on the road might contain the soul of your grandfather. Pythagoras was said to be a vegetarian, and he urged his followers to treat animals with kindness and respect. In Rome, the naturalist Pliny the Elder compiled an enormous encyclopedia of the natural world, including countless observations about animal behavior and intelligence. He described elephants who mourned their dead, dolphins who rescued drowning sailors, and dogs whose loyalty extended beyond the grave. Whether all his stories were accurate is another matter, but they reveal a culture fascinated by the mental lives of animals. These ancient perspectives set the stage for thousands of years of debate. Were animals thinking, feeling beings? Or were they something fundamentally different, driven by instinct rather than reason, incapable of true understanding? The question echoed through the centuries, and it continues to echo today. Let us travel forward in time now, to 17th century France, to the candlelit study of a man whose ideas would shape Western thought for centuries to come. His name was René Descartes, and he was about to draw a line in the sand that would define our understanding of animal minds for generations. Descartes was a brilliant mathematician and philosopher, perhaps best known today for his famous declaration, "I think, therefore I am." He was obsessed with certainty, with finding foundations of knowledge that could not be doubted. And as he contemplated the nature of mind and matter, he arrived at a conclusion that would prove deeply controversial. Humans, Descartes believed, possessed two fundamentally different kinds of substance. There was the physical body, made of flesh and blood and bone, subject to the laws of physics and chemistry. And there was the mind, the soul, the thinking thing, an immaterial substance that existed in a realm beyond the physical. But what of animals? Here Descartes made a fateful choice. Animals, he declared, were merely machines. Complex machines, certainly, far more intricate than any clockwork device of his era. But machines nonetheless, operating according to mechanical principles, responding to stimuli in predictable ways, utterly lacking in the spark of consciousness that defined human existence. When a dog yelped after being kicked, Descartes argued, it was not experiencing pain as a human would. It was simply responding automatically, like a clock chiming on the hour or a music box playing when wound. There was no inner experience, no suffering, no what it is like to be that dog. There was only mechanism. This idea, often called the beast-machine hypothesis, might seem almost absurdly cold to modern ears. How could anyone who had ever owned a pet, who had looked into the eyes of a dog or cat, believe that there was no one home behind those eyes? But Descartes had his reasons, and understanding them helps us understand something important about the history of thought. For Descartes, the stakes were theological as well as philosophical. The Catholic Church taught that the human soul was immortal, destined for heaven or hell after death. If animals also had souls, if they also possessed consciousness and the capacity for suffering, then what happened to them when they died? Did dogs go to heaven? Did cattle? Did the millions of creatures slaughtered for food and labor possess eternal souls that would one day demand justice? By denying animal consciousness entirely, Descartes sidestepped these troubling questions. Animals could not sin, could not be saved, could not be damned, because they were not truly conscious at all. They were God's robots, brilliantly designed but fundamentally empty. The implications were profound, and not always pleasant to contemplate. If animals could not truly suffer, then there was no moral problem with treating them however we wished. Descartes and his followers conducted vivisection experiments on live animals, cutting them open to study their inner workings, dismissing their cries as no more significant than the squeaking of an unoiled hinge. Not everyone was convinced. The philosopher Voltaire, writing a century later, mocked the Cartesian position with characteristic wit. "Answer me, mechanist, has nature arranged all the springs of feeling in this animal to the end that he might not feel? Has he nerves that he may be incapable of suffering?" Yet, despite its critics, the Cartesian divide between human and animal minds proved remarkably persistent. It shaped scientific research for centuries, discouraging serious study of animal cognition and consciousness. If animals were mere machines, what was there to study beyond their mechanical workings? Questions about their inner lives seemed not just unanswerable but meaningless. It would take a revolutionary idea, an idea that would shake the foundations of Western thought, to begin bridging this divide. And that idea was waiting in the wings, soon to emerge from the observations of a young English naturalist aboard a ship called the Beagle. But that story belongs to our next chapter. For now, let us pause and consider how strange it is that humans have swung between such extremes, from ancient cultures who saw animals as spiritual equals, to Enlightenment thinkers who saw them as elaborate automatons. The truth, as we shall see, is far more subtle and far more wonderful than either extreme would suggest. In 1831, a young man named Charles Darwin set sail aboard HMS Beagle on a voyage that would last 5 years and change the world forever. He was 22 years old, uncertain about his future, suffering terribly from seasickness. He had no idea that his observations would lead to one of the most important ideas in the history of science. The theory of evolution by natural selection is often presented as a purely biological idea, concerned with the shapes of finch beaks and the patterns of tortoise shells. But Darwin understood from the very beginning that evolution had profound implications for the mind, both human and animal. If humans had evolved from earlier forms of life, if we shared common ancestors with the apes and, further back, with all living creatures, then the Cartesian divide began to look very shaky indeed. Evolution proceeds by gradual steps, not great leaps. If the human body had evolved gradually from animal bodies, must not the human mind have evolved gradually from animal minds? Darwin pursued this line of thought in his later works, particularly in The Expression of the Emotions in Man and Animals, published in 1872. In this remarkable book, Darwin argued that human emotional expressions, smiles, frowns, tears, laughter, had evolved from similar expressions in our animal ancestors. The dog wagging its tail, the cat arching its back, the chimpanzee baring its teeth. These were not mere mechanical reflexes but expressions of genuine emotional states, connected by an unbroken chain of evolutionary descent to our own feelings. The difference in mind between man and the higher animals, great as it is, certainly is one of degree and not of kind, Darwin wrote. This single sentence contained a revolutionary idea. There was no great gulf between human and animal minds, no magical moment when consciousness suddenly appeared. Instead, there was a continuum, a gradual shading from simpler to more complex forms of mental life. Darwin was not naive about the challenges of studying animal minds. He knew that we could not simply ask a dog or a chimpanzee what it was thinking, but he believed that careful observation of behavior, combined with an understanding of evolutionary principles, could give us genuine insight into the inner lives of other creatures. He collected anecdotes about animal intelligence from correspondents around the world. Dogs who seemed to experience jealousy when their owners showed affection to other animals. Elephants who appeared to mourn their dead. Crows who used tools to solve problems. Monkeys who showed what looked for all the world like a sense of humor. Were these observations anthropomorphism, the error of projecting human qualities onto non-human beings? Perhaps some of them were. Darwin was sometimes too credulous, too willing to accept stories that confirmed his beliefs. But his fundamental insight remains powerful. If our minds evolved from animal minds, then studying animal minds can tell us something about ourselves, and studying ourselves can tell us something about animals. The Darwinian revolution opened the door to a new science of animal minds. But walking through that door would prove more difficult than anyone anticipated. In the decades that followed Darwin's death, a strange thing happened. Scientists became increasingly reluctant to talk about animal minds at all. A new movement called behaviorism arose, and it would slam the door shut for nearly a century. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. For now, let us simply appreciate the magnitude of Darwin's contribution. In a world that had long divided creation into two utterly separate categories, thinking humans and mechanical animals, Darwin showed that we are all part of one vast family tree, connected by invisible threads of ancestry that stretch back billions of years. When you look into the eyes of a chimpanzee, you are looking at a cousin. When you watch a crow solve a puzzle, you are witnessing intelligence that shares deep roots with your own. When your dog greets you at the door with what certainly looks like joy, you are not simply projecting human emotions onto an empty machine. You are recognizing something genuine, something that Darwin helped us see for the first time. And with that recognition comes responsibility. If animals truly have minds, if they can think and feel and perhaps even suffer, then how we treat them matters. This is a question we will return to again and again as our journey continues. But for now, let the implications of Darwin's revolution wash over you like a gentle wave, and prepare for the next chapter of our story. After the great flowering of interest in animal minds that followed Darwin's work, something peculiar happened. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, scientists began to turn away from questions about consciousness, about inner experience, about what animals might think or feel. A new approach was taking hold, and it would dominate the study of behavior for decades. This approach was called behaviorism, and its most influential champion was an American psychologist named John B. Watson. In 1913, Watson published a manifesto that would reshape the field. Psychology, he declared, should concern itself only with observable behavior. Talk of minds, of consciousness, of subjective experience. All of this was unscientific. You could not measure a thought. You could not weigh a feeling. You could not put consciousness under a microscope. Therefore, Watson argued science should simply ignore these things. Watson was not primarily interested in animals, but his ideas had profound implications for the study of animal minds. If we were supposed to ignore questions of consciousness even in humans, then surely we should ignore them in creatures who could not even describe their experiences in words. The study of animal cognition, barely begun, seemed to freeze in place. The behaviorist approach found its purest expression in the work of B.F. Skinner, whose name became synonymous with a particular style of psychological research. Skinner spent decades studying how animals learned through reinforcement and punishment. He invented the famous Skinner box, a controlled environment where rats or pigeons could be trained to press levers or peck at buttons in exchange for food rewards. Skinner's research was meticulous and revealed genuine principles of learning that apply across many species, including humans. But Skinner went further than simply studying behavior. He insisted that behavior was all there was to study. The mind, if it existed at all, was a black box that scientists could not and should not try to open. All that mattered was the relationship between stimulus and response, between action and consequence. Imagine, if you will, a long winter of the scientific soul. For roughly 50 years, from the 1920s through the 1960s, mainstream Western psychology largely abandoned the study of mind. Animals were treated as learning machines, their behaviors cataloged and quantified, but their inner lives remained strictly off-limits for serious scientific inquiry. There is something almost tragic about this period. Darwin had opened a door to understanding animal minds, and behaviorism slammed it shut. Researchers who dared to suggest that animals might have genuine cognitive abilities, that they might think and plan and feel, risked being dismissed as sentimental anthropomorphizers, guilty of projecting human qualities onto mere machines. And yet, even during the behaviorist winter, there were dissenting voices. Ethologists in Europe, scientists who studied animal behavior in natural settings rather than laboratory boxes, continued to observe phenomena that seemed to demand cognitive explanations. They watched birds build intricate nests, bees communicate the location of flowers through elaborate dances, and primates solve problems with apparent insight. Something was clearly going on inside those animal minds, whatever the behaviorists might say. One such voice belonged to Konrad Lorenz, an Austrian scientist who would eventually share the Nobel Prize for his work on animal behavior. Lorenz spent years living closely with animals, particularly birds. He famously imprinted a gaggle of goslings so that they followed him everywhere, convinced he was their mother. His observations led him to believe that animals possessed rich instinctual behaviors that had evolved over millions of years, and that these behaviors hinted at inner lives far more complex than the behaviorists allowed. Another pioneer was Nico Tinbergen, who studied the behavior of wasps, sticklebacks, and seagulls with extraordinary patience and care. Tinbergen developed methods for asking precise questions about why animals behaved as they did. His work, too, suggested that animal behavior could not be reduced to simple stimulus-response chains. There were plans and purposes at work, even if they were not identical to human plans and purposes. The behaviorist winter would not last forever. By the 1960s and 70s, a thaw was beginning. New discoveries about animal communication, tool use, and problem-solving were becoming impossible to ignore, and a new generation of researchers was preparing to ask, once again, the ancient question that humans had always asked: what is it like to be an animal? The 1960s were a time of revolution in many spheres of human life, and science was no exception. In psychology, a quiet revolt was brewing against the behaviorist establishment. Researchers were growing frustrated with the prohibition against discussing minds, thoughts, and consciousness. The black box was about to be pried open. The cognitive revolution, as it came to be called, drew inspiration from several sources. The development of computers provided new metaphors for thinking about the mind. Perhaps the brain was like a computer processing information according to rules and programs. If so, then studying those programs, studying cognition, was not only possible but essential. Linguists like Noam Chomsky argued that human language was too complex to be explained by simple learning principles. Children seem to grasp the deep rules of grammar almost instinctively, suggesting that the mind came equipped with innate structures for understanding the world. If human minds had such structures, might animal minds have their own? And discoveries in neuroscience were revealing the brain in unprecedented detail. Scientists could now observe neurons firing, neurotransmitters flowing, brain regions activating during different tasks. The black box was becoming transparent, and what researchers saw inside was far more complex and interesting than any simple stimulus response machine. For the study of animal minds, the cognitive revolution opened new horizons. Researchers began designing experiments that probed not just what animals did, but what they might be thinking. Could animals form mental maps of their environment? Could they plan for the future? Could they understand the minds of other animals? One landmark came in 1967, when researchers began teaching American Sign Language to a young chimpanzee named Washoe. The experiment, led by Alan and Beatrix Gardner, would transform our understanding of ape minds. Over the years, Washoe learned to use more than 250 signs, combining them in novel ways to express her desires and observations. Washoe's achievements were remarkable, but what struck many observers was not just her vocabulary but her personality. She displayed what seemed like a sense of humor, sometimes teasing her human companions. She formed deep emotional bonds and showed distress when separated from those she loved. When her infant died, she was observed signing baby repeatedly, in what seemed unmistakably like grief. The Washoe Project inspired a wave of ape language studies. Coco the gorilla learned over 1,000 signs and became an international celebrity, appearing on the cover of National Geographic and meeting celebrities and scientists alike. Kanzi, a bonobo, learned to communicate using a special keyboard of symbols and demonstrated an understanding of spoken English that astonished researchers. These studies were not without controversy. Some critics argued that the apes were not truly using language but merely performing learned behaviors for rewards. Others questioned whether the researchers were unconsciously cueing the animals or overinterpreting their gestures. The debates continue to this day. But whatever the limitations of ape language research, it changed the conversation about animal minds forever. Even skeptics had to acknowledge that great apes possessed cognitive abilities far beyond anything behaviorism had imagined. They could learn symbols, combine them in meaningful ways, and use them to communicate about objects and events not immediately present. They could, in some sense, talk about the past and the future, and the apes were just the beginning. As the cognitive revolution spread through animal research, scientists began discovering mental abilities in the most unexpected places. Birds who could count, elephants who recognized themselves in mirrors, dolphins who understood grammar, octopuses who solved puzzles. The animal kingdom, it turned out, was filled with minds, strange minds, alien minds, minds we were only beginning to understand. The door that Darwin had opened and behaviorism had shut was now wide open once more. And this time it would not be closed again. There is a moment in every human life, usually around the age of 18 months, when something remarkable happens. A baby looks into a mirror and, for the first time, realizes that the reflection staring back is not another child but itself. This moment of self-recognition is considered a milestone in human development, a sign that the child has developed a sense of self, an awareness of being a distinct individual in the world. In 1970, a psychologist named Gordon Gallup Jr. wondered whether animals might also be capable of self-recognition. He devised a simple but ingenious experiment that would become one of the most famous tests in the history of animal cognition. The mirror test. The procedure works like this. An animal is first given time to become familiar with a mirror. Initially, most animals treat their reflection as if it were another individual, a potential rival or companion. But after a while, some animals seem to realize that the reflection moves when they move, that it mirrors their actions exactly. They begin using the mirror to explore parts of their bodies they cannot normally see. Then comes the crucial test. While the animal is anesthetized or distracted, researchers place a mark on a part of its body that it can only see in the mirror, typically the forehead or ear. When the animal wakes and sees the mark in the mirror, what does it do? If it reaches toward its own body to investigate the mark, This suggests it understands that the reflection is itself. If it ignores the mark or tries to touch the mirror, the interpretation is less clear. Gallup first tested chimpanzees, and the results were striking. After a few days of exposure to mirrors, the chimps began using them for self-directed behaviors, picking food from their teeth, examining their own bodies, making faces at their reflections. When marked, they reached for the marks on their own faces, not the mirror. Chimpanzees, it seemed, recognized themselves. The mirror test has since been applied to dozens of species. Great apes, chimpanzees, bonobos, orangutans, and to some extent gorillas generally pass the test. But what about other animals? The results have been surprising and sometimes controversial. Elephants have passed the mirror test. In a famous experiment conducted at the Bronx Zoo, an Asian elephant named Happy was marked with a visible cross on her forehead. When she saw herself in a large mirror, she repeatedly touched the mark with her trunk, suggesting she understood that the reflection was her own body. Elephants, with their complex social lives and legendary memories, appear to possess self-awareness. Dolphins have also passed. Researchers at the New York Aquarium found that bottlenose dolphins would examine marks on their bodies using mirrors, twisting and turning to get a better view. Like elephants, dolphins are highly social, long-lived, and possess unusually large brains relative to their body size. Perhaps self-awareness and social complexity go hand in hand. More surprising still, certain birds have passed the mirror test. Magpies, members of the crow family known for their intelligence, have been observed attempting to remove marks from their own bodies after seeing them in mirrors. This was unexpected because birds have very different brain structures from mammals. Self-recognition, it seems, may have evolved independently in multiple branches of the animal kingdom. The mirror test has its critics. Some argue that it is biased toward species that rely heavily on vision and that use physical contact to investigate their environment. A dog, for example, might rely more on smell than sight and might not care about a visible mark at all. This does not mean dogs lack self-awareness, only that the test fails to capture it. Others point out that self-recognition in a mirror is just one small aspect of self-awareness. An animal might have a rich sense of itself, its place in a social hierarchy, its personal history, its desires and fears, without being able to connect that sense of self to a reflection in a piece of glass. The mirror test tells us something, but it does not tell us everything. Still, the fact that any non-human animals pass the mirror test at all is profound. It suggests that the human sense of self, which we often consider so unique and precious, has roots that extend deep into our evolutionary past. We are not the only creatures on this planet who know that we exist. As you drift deeper into relaxation, consider what it might be like to be an elephant, standing before a mirror for the first time, slowly coming to understand that the great gray creature before you is yourself. What does that moment feel like? What does it mean to know that you are you? These are questions we can barely answer for ourselves, let alone for other species. But the asking itself is a kind of wonder. For a very long time, humans believed that tool use was what set us apart from all other creatures. We were the tool makers, Homo faber, the species that shaped the world with our hands and our ingenuity. Other animals might be clever in their own ways, but only humans could take an object from the environment and modify it to serve a purpose. Or so we thought. The first crack in this belief came in 1960, from an unlikely source. A young woman with no formal scientific training, sitting in the forests of what is now Tanzania, watching chimpanzees. Her name was Jane Goodall, and she was about to change everything we thought we knew about the boundary between human and animal. Goodall observed a chimpanzee she had named David Graybeard doing something extraordinary. He was sitting near a termite mound, carefully selecting a long grass stem. He stripped the leaves from the stem, inserted it into the mound, and waited. When he withdrew it, the stem was covered with termites, which he ate with evident satisfaction. David Graybeard was not just using a tool. He was making one. When Goodall reported her findings to her mentor, the famed paleoanthropologist Louis Leakey, he responded with words that have become famous in the history of science. Now we must redefine tool, redefine man, or accept chimpanzees as humans. The discovery forced a fundamental reconsideration of what made humans unique. In the decades since Goodall's discovery, researchers have documented tool use in chimpanzees across Africa, and they have found remarkable variation. Different populations use different tools in different ways, passed down from generation to generation through observation and learning. Some groups use stones to crack nuts. Others use leaves as sponges to soak up water. Still others fashion spears to hunt smaller primates. These are not instinctive behaviors but cultural traditions, invented and transmitted much as human cultures transmit their knowledge. But chimpanzees are our closest living relatives, sharing nearly 99% of our DNA. Perhaps it is not so surprising that they share some of our cognitive abilities. What is truly remarkable is how widespread tool use turns out to be across the animal kingdom, in creatures far removed from our branch of the evolutionary tree. Consider the New Caledonian crow, a bird native to a small island in the South Pacific. These crows are, quite simply, among the most skilled toolmakers on the planet. They fashion hooks from twigs to extract grubs from holes in trees, bending and shaping the wood with their beaks until it is just right. They create step tools with multiple notches, each one serving a specific purpose. And they do not merely use tools that they find. They manufacture them according to precise specifications, storing favorite tools for later use. In laboratory studies, New Caledonian crows have demonstrated abilities that border on the astonishing. One famous crow named Betty spontaneously bent a piece of wire into a hook to retrieve food from a tube, a feat she accomplished on her very first attempt, with no prior training or experience with wire. She understood the problem, recognized that the available tool was inadequate, and modified it to suit her needs. This is not simple learning. This is insight. Sea otters float on their backs in the cold Pacific waters, placing a flat stone on their chests and using it as an anvil to crack open shellfish. Egyptian vultures drop stones onto ostrich eggs to break them open. Dolphins in Australia carry sponges on their beaks to protect themselves while foraging on the seafloor. Elephants have been observed using branches to swat flies or to scratch places they cannot otherwise reach. Even octopuses, those strange and ancient creatures so different from ourselves, have been documented using tools. Some species carry coconut shell halves with them, assembling them into shelters when they need protection. Others arrange rocks to barricade the entrances to their dens. An animal without a backbone, without a centralized brain as we understand it, is nonetheless capable of understanding that objects in its environment can be manipulated to serve its purposes. Tool use requires more than simple intelligence. It requires understanding cause and effect, anticipating future needs, and recognizing that the physical world can be shaped by one's own actions. It requires, in some sense, an imagination. When we see a crow bending a wire or a chimpanzee fashioning a spear, we are glimpsing minds at work, minds that are solving problems and changing their world. Close your eyes and think about tomorrow. Picture yourself waking up, eating breakfast, going about your day. Now think about next week, next month, next year. Your mind travels through time effortlessly, weaving memories of the past together with anticipations of the future. This ability, which psychologists call mental time travel, was long considered uniquely human. After all, how could a creature without language think about times that do not exist? But in the forests and fields, in the oceans and the skies, animals are doing something that looks very much like planning for the future. And careful scientific experiments have begun to reveal just how sophisticated this planning can be. Consider the western scrub jay, a member of the crow family found across western North America. These birds cache food, hiding thousands of seeds and nuts in scattered locations to be retrieved later. This behavior might seem like simple instinct, an automatic response programmed by evolution. But the details reveal something far more interesting. Scrub jays remember not only where they hid their food, but when they hid it and what kind of food it was. In experiments conducted by the psychologist Nicola Clayton and her colleagues at Cambridge University, scrub jays demonstrated that they understood the concept of perishability. They would preferentially retrieve worms, which they love but which decay quickly, before retrieving nuts, which last longer. They knew that time had passed and adjusted their behavior accordingly. Even more remarkably, scrub jays seemed to anticipate their future needs. In one experiment, birds were placed in a situation where they would spend the next morning in one of two compartments. In one compartment, they would receive breakfast. In the other, they would not. After learning this pattern, the jays began caching extra food in the compartment where they knew they would be hungry. They were not responding to current hunger. They were preparing for hunger they had not yet felt. This capacity to anticipate future states of mind, to understand that your future self will have needs different from your current self, is a remarkable cognitive achievement. It requires what philosophers call episodic future thinking, the ability to mentally simulate possible futures and make decisions in the present based on those simulations. Scrub jays are not alone in this ability. Great apes have been shown to plan for the future in various ways. In one study, bonobos and orangutans were given the opportunity to select tools that they would need for a task the following day. They consistently chose the correct tools, even though there was no immediate use for them. They were thinking ahead, preparing for a future that had not yet arrived. Squirrels scatter their hordes across wide areas, apparently remembering each location for months. Clark's nutcrackers, another member of the corvid family, cache tens of thousands of seeds each fall and retrieve them through the long mountain winter, remembering locations buried under feet of snow. The spatial memory required for this feat is staggering. But memory is not just about location. Animals also seem to remember events, the what and where and when of their experiences. This is called episodic memory, and it was once thought to be uniquely human. After all, episodic memory seems to require a sense of self that persists through time, an autobiographical consciousness that links past experiences to a continuous identity. Yet the evidence from scrub jays, great apes, and other species suggests that some form of episodic-like memory exists in the animal kingdom. Whether these animals experience their memories the way we do, whether they feel the bittersweet pang of nostalgia or the warm glow of happy recollection, we cannot say for certain. But they clearly carry the past with them, using it to navigate the present and prepare for the future. As you rest now, letting your thoughts drift through time, consider this. We are not the only creatures who remember yesterday and imagine tomorrow. Throughout the natural world, minds are traveling through time, weaving past and future into the fabric of the present moment. The stream of consciousness flows through many channels. Imagine living in a world where your survival depends not just on finding food and avoiding predators, but on navigating a complex web of social relationships. You must remember who your friends are and who your rivals are. You must recognize individuals, track their reputations, anticipate their behavior, and adjust your own actions accordingly. You must form alliances, resolve conflicts, communicate your intentions, and interpret the intentions of others. This is the world inhabited by many social animals, from primates to dolphins, from elephants to wolves. And scientists have come to believe that the demands of social living have been one of the most powerful forces shaping the evolution of animal minds. The social brain hypothesis, as it is called, suggests that the large brains of primates, cetaceans, and certain other groups evolved primarily to handle the challenges of social life. Living in groups offers many benefits: protection from predators, cooperative hunting, shared childcare, and the exchange of information. But it also creates problems that require sophisticated cognitive solutions. Among chimpanzees, social life is a constantly shifting drama of alliances and betrayals. Males compete for dominance through displays of strength, but also through political maneuvering. A lower-ranking male might challenge the alpha not through direct confrontation but by building coalitions with other males, grooming allies, and waiting for the right moment to strike. The primatologist Franz de Waal has documented these strategies in detail, describing a world of Machiavellian intelligence that would not be out of place in a Renaissance court. But social intelligence is not just about competition. It is also about cooperation, about understanding the needs and intentions of others well enough to work together toward common goals. In many social species, individuals engage in behaviors that seem to require a kind of empathy, an ability to recognize and respond to the emotional states of others. Elephants are perhaps the most striking example. When an elephant dies, other members of the herd often stay with the body for hours or even days. They touch it gently with their trunks, cover it with leaves and branches, and appear to be grieving. When elephants encounter the bones of deceased elephants, even those who died years before, they investigate them carefully, running their trunks over the remains. They do not show this interest in the bones of other species. Something about elephant remains evokes a response that looks very much like recognition and perhaps even mourning. Dolphins, too, have been observed supporting sick or injured companions, lifting them to the surface so they can breathe. They stay with dying friends, seemingly reluctant to leave. In the wild, dolphins live in complex societies with changing alliances, and individuals seem to remember their relationships with specific individuals for decades. Wolves, the ancestors of our domestic dogs, are highly social hunters who cooperate to bring down prey much larger than themselves. They maintain strict hierarchies, but they also show what appears to be affection and loyalty. A wolf pack is not just a hunting team but a family, bound by relationships that persist over lifetimes. Perhaps the most remarkable social cognition of all is what psychologists call theory of mind. The ability to understand that other individuals have thoughts, beliefs, and desires that may differ from your own. Do animals have theory of mind? This question has sparked decades of research and debate. But social intelligence is not just about competition. It is also about cooperation, about understanding the needs and intentions of others well enough to work together toward common goals. In many social species, individuals engage in behaviors that seem to require a kind of empathy, an ability to recognize and respond to the emotional states of others. Elephants are perhaps the most striking example. When an elephant dies, other members of the herd often stay with the body for hours or even days. They touch it gently with their trunks, cover it with leaves and branches, and appear to be grieving. When elephants encounter the bones of deceased elephants, even those who died years before, they investigate them carefully, running their trunks over the remains. They do not show this interest in the bones of other species. Something about elephant remains evokes a response that looks very much like recognition and perhaps even mourning. Dolphins, too, have been observed supporting sick or injured companions, lifting them to the surface so they can breathe. They stay with dying friends, seemingly reluctant to leave. In the wild, dolphins live in complex societies with changing alliances, and individuals seem to remember their relationships with specific individuals for decades. Wolves, the ancestors of our domestic dogs, are highly social hunters who cooperate to bring down prey much larger than themselves. They maintain strict hierarchies, but they also show what appears to be affection and loyalty. A wolf pack is not just a hunting team but a family, bound by relationships that persist over lifetimes. Perhaps the most remarkable social cognition of all is what psychologists call theory of mind. The ability to understand that other individuals have thoughts, beliefs, and desires that may differ from your own. Do animals have theory of mind? This question has sparked decades of research and debate. In a laboratory at the University of Arizona, and later at Harvard and Brandeis, there lived a bird who would challenge our understanding of animal intelligence in ways that continue to resonate today. His name was Alex, short for Avian Language Experiment, and he was an African gray parrot with a mind that defied expectations. Alex was purchased from a pet store in 1977 by a young scientist named Irene Pepperberg. At the time, the scientific consensus held that parrot speech was mere mimicry, a trick of vocal imitation with no understanding behind it. Parrots could copy sounds, the thinking went, but they did not comprehend what they were saying. They were feathered tape recorders, nothing more. Pepperberg was not so sure. She had read about the ape language studies, about Washoe and her signs, and she wondered whether birds might possess similar abilities. After all, African gray parrots had unusually large brains for their body size, lived long lives in complex social groups, and had demonstrated remarkable vocal learning abilities in the wild. What if their speech could become something more than imitation? Over the next 30 years, Pepperberg worked with Alex using a training method she called the model rival technique. Two humans would interact with objects while Alex watched, one acting as a model for correct behavior and a rival for the bird's attention. Alex, motivated by his desire to participate, would learn to label objects, colors, shapes, and materials. The results were astonishing. Alex learned to identify over 100 objects by name. He could label colors and shapes, distinguishing between red and blue, between circles and squares. He understood the concepts of same and different, bigger and smaller. When shown a tray of objects and asked how many were green, he would count the green ones and give the correct number. But Alex was not merely performing tricks. He seemed to understand what he was saying. When he asked for a grape and was given a banana instead, he would repeat his request with what seemed like irritation. When he was tired of testing, he would say, "Want to go back," and refuse to cooperate. He would comment on objects spontaneously, identifying things he saw without being prompted. Perhaps most famously, Alex appeared to understand the concept of zero, a mathematical abstraction that human children typically do not grasp until the age of 3 or 4. When shown a tray with no objects of a particular type and asked how many there were, Alex would answer none. He had acquired an understanding of absence, of the concept that there could be nothing where something was expected. Alex also showed signs of what might be called emotional intelligence. He would comfort younger birds in the laboratory when they were distressed. He seemed to understand the moods of his human caretakers and would sometimes apologize after behaving badly, saying "I'm sorry" without being prompted. When he made errors on tests, he would sometimes say "I'm sorry" before being told he was wrong. On September 6, 2007, Alex died unexpectedly at the age of 31. His last words to Irene Pepperberg, spoken the night before, were "You be good. I love you." Whether Alex truly understood these words in the way humans understand them, we cannot know for certain. But the impact of his life and work continues to shape our understanding of animal minds. Alex demonstrated that complex cognitive abilities could evolve in species very different from our own. Birds diverged from our evolutionary line over 300 million years ago, yet here was a bird who could count, categorize, and communicate. His achievements suggest that intelligence is not a single ladder with humans at the top, but a vast landscape with many peaks, many different ways of being smart. As you rest and let your mind wander, consider the remarkable fact that a small gray bird could learn to speak not just with his voice but with meaning, could ask questions and express preferences and perhaps even love. The universe of minds is larger and stranger than we ever imagined. If we want to understand what an alien intelligence might be like, we need not look to the stars. We need only look beneath the waves, where an animal so different from us that it seems to have arrived from another world has evolved one of the most remarkable minds on Earth. This animal is the octopus, and its existence challenges everything we think we know about consciousness and cognition. The octopus belongs to a group of animals called cephalopods, which also includes squid and cuttlefish. These creatures are mollusks, more closely related to clams and snails than to any vertebrate. Our last common ancestor with the octopus lived over 600 million years ago, a simple worm-like creature with no brain to speak of. Everything that makes an octopus intelligent evolved independently from our own intelligence. It is a separate experiment in the evolution of mind. The octopus brain is unlike any other. While most of its neurons are located in a central brain wrapped around its esophagus, a majority of its nerve cells are distributed throughout its 8 arms. Each arm contains clusters of neurons that can process information and control movement semi-independently. In some sense, an octopus has 9 brains, or one brain distributed across its entire body. This distributed intelligence allows octopuses to perform remarkable feats. A single arm can explore a crevice, taste what it touches, and decide whether to grasp an object, all without consulting the central brain. The octopus can focus its attention on one task while its arms handle others autonomously. It is as if your hands could think for themselves while you concentrated on something else entirely. But what truly astonishes researchers is the evidence of octopus cognition and personality. In aquariums and laboratories around the world, octopuses have demonstrated problem-solving abilities that seem to require genuine intelligence. They can open jars from the inside to escape, navigate mazes, and use tools. They recognize individual human faces and behave differently toward people they like and people they dislike. One famous octopus at the Seattle Aquarium, named Lucretia McEvil by her keepers, had a particular dislike for one volunteer. Whenever this person walked by her tank, Lucretia would spray her with water from her siphon. She never sprayed anyone else. Somehow, she had formed a negative opinion of this specific individual and acted on it consistently. Another octopus at the University of Otago in New Zealand learned to turn off a bright light that annoyed her by squirting water at it, short-circuiting the electrical system. She was not taught to do this. She figured it out on her own. When the light was fixed and turned back on, she did it again. The researchers eventually gave up and let her have her darkness. Octopuses are also masters of disguise, capable of changing not only their color but the texture of their skin in milliseconds. They can mimic the appearance of rocks, coral, seaweed, or even other animals. This ability requires sophisticated visual processing and body control, a kind of artistic intelligence that serves survival. Perhaps most poignant is the fact that octopuses live such short lives, typically only 1 to 2 years. All the intelligence they develop, all the learning they accumulate is lost when they die. They do not care for their young after hatching. There is no transmission of knowledge from generation to generation. Each octopus must figure out the world anew, and yet they do so with remarkable sophistication. What is it like to be an octopus? The philosopher Thomas Nagel famously asked what it is like to be a bat, arguing that we can never fully know the subjective experience of another species. If that is true for a bat, a fellow mammal, how much more mysterious must be the inner life of an octopus, a creature whose brain and body are so utterly different from our own. And yet something is clearly happening behind those strange, horizontal pupils. There is a mind at work, even if we cannot fully comprehend its nature. The octopus reminds us that consciousness may take forms we can barely imagine, that the universe may be filled with ways of thinking and feeling that we have only begun to explore. Beneath the surface of the world's oceans, in a realm of blue darkness and crushing pressure, some of the most extraordinary conversations on Earth are taking place. They are conversations we cannot hear without special equipment, conducted in frequencies that travel for hundreds of miles through the water. They are the songs and calls of whales and dolphins, and they hint at minds as complex and social as any on our planet. Humpback whales are perhaps the most famous singers of the sea. The males produce elaborate songs that can last for hours, complex sequences of moans, cries, and chirps arranged in patterns that repeat and evolve over time. These songs are not random noise. They have structure, grammar, rhythm. They are, by any reasonable definition, a form of music. What makes humpback songs even more remarkable is that they change over time, and they change in coordinated ways across entire populations. At the beginning of each breeding season, all the males in a given population sing roughly the same song. But as the season progresses, the song evolves. New phrases are added, old phrases are dropped, and the song shifts in ways that seem almost like fashion, like cultural trends moving through a community. Researchers have tracked these changes over decades and found that song innovations can spread from one population to another, traveling across ocean basins like hit songs spreading across continents. A new phrase invented by whales near Australia has been documented traveling eastward to French Polynesia over the course of several years, adopted by one population after another. This is cultural transmission, the passing of learned behavior from individual to individual, across vast distances and generations. Dolphins, the smaller cousins of whales, have their own sophisticated communication systems. Bottlenose dolphins develop signature whistles, unique sounds that function much like names. Each dolphin creates its own signature whistle early in life and uses it throughout its lifetime. Other dolphins learn to recognize these whistles and will use them to call specific individuals, essentially calling them by name. In experiments, dolphins have shown that they remember the signature whistles of companions they have not seen for 20 years or more. They recognize the names of old friends across decades of separation. This suggests not only excellent memory but also persistent social bonds, relationships that endure even when individuals are apart. Dolphins also engage in what appear to be genuine conversations, exchanging clicks and whistles in turn-taking patterns similar to human dialogue. Researchers have found that dolphins wait for each other to finish vocalizing before responding, a basic rule of conversation that requires understanding that another individual is communicating and deserves attention. Orcas, the largest members of the dolphin family, live in tight-knit matrilineal groups led by elder females. These groups have their own dialects, distinctive patterns of calls that are passed down through generations. Different orca populations have such different dialects that they may not fully understand each other, like humans speaking different languages. And these dialects persist over time, maintained by cultural learning rather than genetic inheritance. Orca cultures include not just communication but also hunting techniques, travel routes, and social customs. Some populations eat fish exclusively. Others hunt marine mammals. These preferences are not genetic but learned, passed from mother to calf over years of close contact. An orca raised in a fish-eating population will eat fish. The same orca raised in a mammal-hunting population would hunt seals. Culture shapes behavior as powerfully as instinct. As you drift towards sleep, imagine floating in warm tropical waters, listening to the distant songs of humpback whales echoing through the blue. Those songs have been sung for millions of years, passed down and transformed through countless generations. They are the oldest music on Earth, and they carry meanings we are only beginning to understand. We have journeyed through the minds of apes and elephants, dolphins and octopuses, parrots and crows. These are large animals with relatively large brains, creatures whose intelligence seems, in some ways, comprehensible to us. But now let us turn our attention to a very different kind of mind, one that challenges our assumptions about what intelligence requires. Let us consider the insects. An insect brain is tiny, sometimes containing fewer than 1 million neurons compared to the 86 billion in a human brain. Surely, one might think such a small brain could not support anything we would recognize as thought. And yet insects accomplish feats of navigation, communication, and problem-solving that continue to astonish researchers. Consider the honeybee. A single bee's brain is roughly the size of a sesame seed, yet it can navigate across miles of landscape, remember the locations of hundreds of flowers, communicate those locations to its hive mates through an elaborate symbolic dance, and make complex decisions about which flowers to visit and when. A bee's brain may be small, but it is exquisitely efficient, processing information in ways we are only beginning to understand. The waggle dance of honeybees is one of the most remarkable communication systems in the animal kingdom. When a forager bee discovers a good source of nectar, she returns to the hive and performs a figure-8 dance on the honeycomb. The angle of her dance relative to the vertical indicates the direction of the food source relative to the sun. The duration of her waggle indicates the distance. Other bees watch the dance and then fly directly to the food source, sometimes miles away, guided only by this symbolic information. This is not simple stimulus-response behavior. It is abstract communication, using movement to represent information about the world. The bee doing the dance is, in some sense, telling a story about a place she has been, and the bees watching are understanding that story well enough to act on it. Carl von Frisch, the scientist who decoded the waggle dance, received the Nobel Prize for his discovery, recognizing the profound significance of symbolic communication in a creature so small. But individual bee intelligence is only part of the story. Perhaps even more remarkable is what happens when bees work together. A honeybee colony, with its thousands of individuals, behaves in many ways like a single superorganism, a collective intelligence that emerges from the interactions of its parts. When a colony needs to find a new home, it faces a complex decision. Scout bees fly out in all directions, searching for suitable cavities. They return and perform dances advertising the sites they have found. Other scouts investigate the advertised sites and, if impressed, begin dancing for them as well. Gradually, through a process of competitive advertising, the colony reaches a consensus. The best site wins, not because any single bee evaluated all the options, but because the collective dance-off converged on the optimal choice. This collective decision-making has been studied intensively by the biologist Thomas Seeley, who has shown that bee colonies make remarkably good decisions, often better than individual experts could make. The swarm is, in a very real sense, smarter than any of its members. Ants, too, display collective intelligence that far exceeds what any individual ant could accomplish. Army ants construct living bridges with their own bodies, allowing their colony mates to cross gaps. Leafcutter ants maintain elaborate underground farms, cultivating fungus gardens with a sophistication that rivals human agriculture. These behaviors emerge not from central planning but from the interactions of millions of simple individuals following local rules. Recent research has revealed unexpected cognitive abilities even in individual insects. Bumblebees can learn to pull strings to access hidden rewards, and they can learn this behavior by watching other bees. Fruit flies appear to have something like attention, focusing their tiny minds on relevant stimuli while ignoring distractions. Some researchers argue that insects may even experience something like emotions, states of optimism and pessimism that color their behavior. The insect world challenges us to think differently about mind and intelligence. Perhaps consciousness does not require a large brain. Perhaps it does not even require a single brain. Perhaps mind can emerge from networks of simple components, each following basic rules, collectively producing something greater than the sum of its parts. As you drift deeper into relaxation, consider the possibility that intelligence pervades the natural world in forms we have barely begun to recognize. We have spoken much about animal cognition, about thinking and planning and problem solving. But there is another dimension to mind that matters just as much, perhaps more. It is the dimension of feeling, of emotion, of the rich subjective experience that gives life its color and meaning. Do animals feel? Do they experience joy and sorrow, fear and contentment, love and grief? For centuries, these questions seemed unanswerable. Today, the evidence is becoming too powerful to ignore. Charles Darwin himself believed that emotions were continuous across species. In his book on emotional expression, he documented the ways that humans and animals display similar feelings through similar behaviors. A frightened dog cowers and trembles. A frightened human does the same. An angry cat arches its back and hisses. An angry human tenses and raises her voice. These parallels, Darwin argued, reflect a shared evolutionary heritage of emotional experience. Modern neuroscience has confirmed that the brain structures underlying emotion are remarkably similar across mammals. The amygdala, which processes fear in humans, performs the same function in rats and mice. The dopamine systems that generate feelings of pleasure and reward in human brains work the same way in the brains of other animals. If the machinery of emotion is the same, is it not reasonable to suppose that the experience of emotion is similar as well? The neuroscientist Jake Panksepp spent decades studying emotion in animals, focusing particularly on rats. He discovered that when rats play with each other, they produce ultrasonic vocalizations at around 50 kilohertz, too high for human ears to hear without special equipment. These vocalizations increase during enjoyable activities and decrease during stressful ones. Panksepp called them rat laughter. When Panksepp tickled rats, mimicking the rough and tumble play that rats engage in naturally, they produced these chirping sounds in abundance. The rats would seek out the tickling, running toward the experimenter's hand and bonding with humans who played with them. They seemed, by every measurable indicator, to be having fun. Play itself is a powerful indicator of positive emotion. Animals play when they feel safe and well-fed, when their basic needs are met and they have energy to spare. Young mammals of all kinds engage in play. Puppies wrestling, lion cubs stalking each other, young goats leaping and spinning in the air. This behavior serves no immediate survival purpose. It is done, apparently, for the sheer joy of it. But animals also experience darker emotions. Fear is universal among creatures that must avoid predators, and the physiological signs of fear, the racing heart, the surge of stress hormones, the heightened alertness, are strikingly similar across species. Anxiety, too, appears widespread. Animals in impoverished or unpredictable environments often develop behaviors that parallel human anxiety disorders: repetitive movements, excessive grooming, reluctance to explore. Grief may be the most poignant animal emotion, and evidence for it has been documented across many species. We have already spoken of elephant mourning rituals, of herds returning to the bones of their dead. Similar behaviors have been observed in chimpanzees, who have been seen carrying the bodies of deceased infants for days or weeks, unable or unwilling to let go. Dolphins support dead companions at the surface. Crows gather around their fallen flockmates in what appear to be avian funerals. Dogs who lose their human companions often show signs of depression, refusing to eat, losing interest in activities they once enjoyed, spending long hours lying in places where their person used to sit. Whether they understand death as we do, we cannot know. But they clearly feel the absence of those they loved. Perhaps most compelling are the stories of cross-species emotional bonds. The gorilla Coco, who learned sign language, adopted a kitten she named All Ball and was devastated when the kitten was killed by a car, signing cry, sad, frown when told of the death. Elephants have been known to rescue other species from danger, including humans. Dogs read human emotions with extraordinary sensitivity, responding to our sadness with comfort and to our joy with shared excitement. The emotional lives of animals are not exactly like ours. They may not reflect on their feelings as we do, may not wonder why they feel what they feel. But the feelings themselves, the raw experience of pleasure and pain, joy and sorrow, appear to be part of a vast inheritance we share with countless other species. We are all feeling creatures, navigating a world that can bring us suffering and delight. Of all the questions we might ask about animal minds, perhaps none is more important than this. Do animals suffer? Not just whether they have nociceptors, the nerve endings that detect tissue damage, but whether they experience pain in the way we do, as something awful, something to be escaped, something that diminishes the quality of their existence. The answer to this question has profound implications for how we treat the other creatures who share our world. For a very long time, as we have seen, Western science and philosophy denied that animals could truly suffer. Descartes' mechanical beast had no inner life to be damaged. The behaviorist's black box contained no experience to be harmed. Pain might cause animals to behave in certain ways, but there was no one home to feel the pain. This view was convenient for those who used animals in ways that would be troubling if animals could suffer, but it was never based on strong evidence. Today, the evidence points overwhelmingly in the other direction. Animals have the same neurological equipment for detecting and processing pain that we do. They have nociceptors throughout their bodies. They have the neural pathways that carry pain signals to the brain. They have the brain regions that, in humans, generate the subjective experience of suffering. When these systems are activated, animals behave exactly as we would expect suffering creatures to behave. They cry out, they guard injured body parts, they avoid situations associated with past pain. More tellingly, animals respond to painkillers in ways that only make sense if they are actually experiencing pain. An injured rat given access to morphine will self-administer the drug, but a healthy rat will not. The injured rat is apparently trying to relieve its suffering. When chickens with painful leg disorders are given a choice between medicated and unmedicated food, they preferentially eat the food containing painkillers. They seem to know that the medicine makes them feel better. Even fish, long dismissed as too simple to suffer, show evidence of pain experience. When injected with irritating substances, fish rub the affected areas against objects, breathe rapidly, and lose interest in food. They avoid locations where they previously experienced pain. When given painkillers, their distressed behaviors decrease. The Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness, signed by a prominent group of neuroscientists in 2012, explicitly stated that the evidence supports the existence of conscious experience in fish and other non-mammalian animals. The philosopher Jeremy Bentham, writing in the 18th century, argued that the key question about our treatment of animals was not whether they could reason or speak, but whether they could suffer. The question is not, can they reason, nor can they talk, but can they suffer? If they can, Bentham argued, then their suffering deserves moral consideration. This insight has slowly transformed our moral thinking about animals. Laws now protect animals from unnecessary cruelty in most countries. Scientific research involving animals is subject to ethical review. The treatment of farm animals has come under increasing scrutiny, as people recognize that the scale of animal suffering in industrial agriculture may be one of the great moral issues of our time. But the implications extend beyond obvious cases of harm. If animals can suffer, then they can also flourish. If they experience pain, they presumably also experience pleasure. A pig kept in a barren concrete pen may not be in physical pain, but is she living a life worth living? A captive orca swimming in circles in a tank may be well-fed, but is her mind not starving for the stimulation of the open ocean? These are difficult questions, and reasonable people disagree about the answers. But the questions themselves arise directly from the science of animal minds. As we learn more about what animals think and feel, we are forced to reconsider our responsibilities toward them. The more we understand, the harder it becomes to look away. As you rest now, breathing slowly and peacefully, consider the quiet revolution in our understanding of animal suffering. Across the world, in laboratories and farms and oceans, creatures are having experiences, good and bad. Their lives matter to them, even if we cannot fully understand what their lives are like. This recognition is changing, slowly but surely, how humans treat the other inhabitants of our planet. As you listen to these words, perhaps growing drowsy yourself, you may soon enter a state that humans have pondered since the dawn of consciousness: the world of dreams. In dreams, our minds create entire realities, populated by people and places, emotions and events, all arising from within. It is one of the most mysterious aspects of conscious experience. And it is not ours alone. Anyone who has watched a sleeping dog twitch its legs and whimper softly, apparently chasing dream rabbits through meadows of the mind, has wondered what animals experience when they sleep. For a long time, this question seemed unanswerable. We cannot ask a dog what it dreamed. But modern neuroscience has given us windows into the sleeping animal brain, and what we see there is extraordinary. Sleep is not a simple state. It consists of multiple phases, the most famous of which is rapid eye movement sleep, or REM sleep. In humans, REM sleep is when most vivid dreaming occurs. Our eyes dart beneath our closed lids. Our brains become almost as active as when we are awake, and our bodies are temporarily paralyzed, perhaps to prevent us from acting out our dreams. All mammals studied so far exhibit REM sleep. So do birds. So, remarkably, do some reptiles. The brain patterns during REM sleep in these animals closely resemble those seen in dreaming humans. If the neural signature of dreaming is present, is it not reasonable to suppose that something like dreaming is occurring? The most compelling evidence comes from studies of rats. Researchers at MIT trained rats to run through a specific maze, recording the activity of neurons in their hippocampus, the brain region crucial for spatial memory and navigation. Each location in the maze was associated with a particular pattern of neural firing, creating a kind of neural map. Then the researchers recorded from the same neurons while the rats slept. During REM sleep, the rats' brains replayed the neural patterns associated with running the maze. The sequences of firing were so similar that researchers could tell which part of the maze the sleeping rat was dreaming about. The rats were, quite literally, running through the maze in their dreams. Similar findings have emerged from studies of birds. Zebra finches learn their songs by listening to adult birds and practicing, much as human children learn language. Researchers recorded the neural activity in singing finches, finding patterns associated with specific notes and phrases. During sleep, the birds' brains replayed these patterns, as if the birds were rehearsing their songs in their dreams. Some researchers believe this dream rehearsal helps consolidate learning, strengthening the neural pathways needed for skilled performance. What might these animal dreams feel like from the inside? Do rats experience the maze as a visual scene, complete with walls and turns and the scent of food at the end? Do birds hear their songs in their dreams, the melodies playing through their sleeping minds? We cannot know for certain, but the neural evidence suggests that something experiential is happening, that animal sleep is not merely a period of unconscious rest, but a time when minds remain active, processing the experiences of the day. Cats spend an enormous portion of their lives asleep, often more than half of each day. Their REM sleep is particularly pronounced, and anyone who has observed a sleeping cat has seen the twitching whiskers, the paddling paws, the soft chirping sounds. Cats dream, and their dreams appear to involve the activities that fill their waking lives: hunting, exploring, perhaps playing. As you drift towards sleep yourself, consider that you are joining a vast community of dreamers. Across the world, in forests and oceans, in homes and burrows, minds are slipping into that strange twilight realm where memory and imagination merge. Dreams may be one of the oldest forms of consciousness, a theater of the mind that evolution built long before humans walked the earth. In sleep, we are not so different from the other creatures who dream beside us. We have traveled far in our exploration of animal minds. We have seen evidence of thought and memory, of emotion and suffering, of communication and culture. We have met creatures who use tools, recognize themselves in mirrors, plan for the future, and perhaps even dream. But beneath all these discoveries lies a deeper mystery, one that philosophers and scientists have struggled with for centuries. It is the mystery of consciousness itself. The philosopher David Chalmers famously distinguished between the easy problems of consciousness and the hard problem. The easy problems, despite their name, are not truly easy. They include explaining how the brain processes sensory information, how it controls behavior, how it integrates information from different sources. These are immensely complex scientific challenges, but they are in principle solvable by understanding the mechanisms of the brain. The hard problem is different. It is the problem of explaining why there is subjective experience at all. Why does it feel like something to see the color red, to taste chocolate, to feel pain? We can imagine a universe in which brains process information in all the same ways, but in which there is no inner experience, no light of awareness, no one home. Why is our universe not like that? Why does consciousness exist? This question becomes even more puzzling when we consider animal minds. We can study animal brains. We can observe animal behavior. We can draw inferences about what animals might think and feel. But we cannot enter an animal's experience directly. We cannot know with certainty whether there is something it is like to be a bat, to echolocate through the darkness, to hang upside down in a cave. We cannot know what it is like to be an octopus, to taste with one's arms, to change color with one's thoughts. Some philosophers have argued that we cannot even be certain that other humans are conscious. Perhaps, they suggest, you are the only conscious being in the universe, and everyone else is a philosophical zombie, behaving as if conscious but with no inner experience. This position, called solipsism, is almost impossible to refute logically, but almost no one actually believes it. We are confident that other humans are conscious because they are so similar to us, because they report experiences like ours, because we can imagine ourselves in their place. With animals, the situation is more complex. They cannot report their experiences in language we can understand. They differ from us in their bodies, their brains, their evolutionary histories. The further an animal is from us on the tree of life, the harder it becomes to imagine what its experience might be like, if it has experience at all. And yet, the scientific evidence increasingly suggests that consciousness is not a uniquely human phenomenon. The Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness, which we mentioned earlier, was signed by a group of prominent neuroscientists who concluded that the weight of evidence indicates that non-human animals possess the neurological substrates that generate consciousness. They did not claim to solve the hard problem, but they affirmed that the neural basis of consciousness is shared across many species. Perhaps consciousness is not a single thing that you either have or lack, but a spectrum with many dimensions. Perhaps there are simpler and more complex forms of awareness, from the faint glimmer of sentience in an insect to the rich inner life of an ape. Perhaps consciousness evolved gradually, just as other biological features evolved, becoming more elaborate and sophisticated over millions of years. Some scientists and philosophers have proposed that consciousness is a fundamental feature of the universe, as basic as mass or charge. This view, called panpsychism, suggests that every physical system has some form of experience, however minimal. A single electron might have a flicker of something like awareness, and complex systems like brains might combine these flickers into the rich conscious experience we know. This is a radical idea, and it remains highly controversial, but it represents one attempt to solve the hard problem by making consciousness less mysterious. We may never fully solve the hard problem of consciousness. We may never know exactly what it is like to be another creature, or whether our intuitions about animal experience are accurate. But the mystery itself is precious. It reminds us that the universe is stranger and more wonderful than we can easily imagine, that behind the eyes of other beings may lie worlds we can barely glimpse. In that mystery, there is both humility and wonder. If consciousness remains mysterious, the brain is becoming less so. Modern neuroscience has developed remarkable tools for peering inside the living brain, mapping its structures, tracing its connections, and observing its activity in real time. These tools are revealing that animal brains, while differing in size and organization, share fundamental features with our own. And in those shared features, we find clues about the nature of animal minds. The basic building blocks of brains are neurons, cells that communicate through electrical and chemical signals. Neurons are found in virtually all animals with nervous systems, from jellyfish to humans. The ways they connect and communicate are remarkably similar across species. A neuron in a rat's brain works essentially the same way as a neuron in a human brain. The differences lie not in the components but in their organization, the architecture of the circuits they form. Mammalian brains share a common basic structure, inherited from our common ancestors. The brainstem controls basic functions like breathing and heart rate. The cerebellum coordinates movement and balance. The limbic system, including structures like the amygdala and hippocampus, processes emotion and memory. And the cerebral cortex, the wrinkled outer layer of the brain, handles higher cognitive functions like perception, decision-making, and abstract thought. Humans have an unusually large cerebral cortex relative to body size, and this is often cited as the source of our exceptional intelligence. But cortex size is not everything. Dolphins and elephants have larger brains than humans, with extensive cortical folding. Crows and parrots have small brains but exceptionally dense concentrations of neurons, particularly in regions analogous to the mammalian cortex. Intelligence, it seems, can be achieved through different neural architectures. One of the most striking discoveries of comparative neuroscience is the existence of spindle cells, also called von Economo-neurons, in species beyond humans. These unusual neurons, characterized by their elongated shape, were once thought to be unique to humans and great apes. They are found in brain regions associated with social cognition and self-awareness. But in recent years, spindle cells have been discovered in elephants, in whales and dolphins, and even in some species of monkeys. Their presence in these socially complex, large-brain species suggests that spindle cells may play a role in the kind of sophisticated social cognition that these animals display. Perhaps they are part of the neural machinery that allows for empathy, self-recognition, and the understanding of other minds. Neuroimaging studies have allowed researchers to observe animal brains in action. Functional MRI scans of dogs, for example, have revealed that when dogs smell their owners, a region associated with positive reward lights up. Dogs are not just recognizing their humans. They are experiencing something like pleasure at the recognition. The same reward regions activate when dogs see human faces expressing positive emotions, suggesting that dogs are genuinely attuned to human emotional states. Studies of primate brains have identified mirror neurons, cells that fire both when an individual performs an action and when it observes another individual performing the same action. These neurons may be the basis for imitation learning and perhaps for empathy, the ability to understand another's experience by simulating it in one's own brain. Mirror neurons have been found in multiple species, suggesting that the capacity for social understanding is widespread. The more we learn about animal brains, the more we find familiar structures performing familiar functions. The differences between human brains and other animal brains are differences of degree rather than kind. We have more of certain types of neurons, more connections in certain regions, more elaborate development of certain circuits. But the basic plan is shared, the legacy of our common ancestry. This shared heritage has profound implications. If our brains are variations on a common theme, might not our minds be as well? If the neural substrates of emotion, memory, and perception are present in other animals, might not the experiences generated by those substrates be present as well? The brain, that 3-pound universe of connections, may be telling us that consciousness is far more common than we once believed. We have spent much of our journey considering what goes on inside the minds of animals, trying to understand their thoughts and feelings, their perceptions and experiences. But there is another question, equally fascinating and perhaps even more humbling. What do animals think of us? When a dog looks at its owner, when a crow watches a human walk by, when a whale surfaces near a boat full of tourists, what are they perceiving? What are they thinking? To begin to answer this question, we must first understand that animals do not perceive the world the same way we do. Each species has evolved sensory systems tuned to its particular needs, its ecological niche, its way of life. The world as experienced by a dog or a bee or an eagle is profoundly different from the world as experienced by a human. Dogs, for example, live in a world dominated by smell. Their noses contain up to 300 million olfactory receptors, compared to our mere 6 million. The part of their brain devoted to analyzing smells is proportionally 40 times greater than ours. When a dog meets you, it is not primarily seeing you. It is reading your chemical signature, detecting where you have been, what you have eaten, perhaps even how you are feeling. You are, to a dog, a walking autobiography written in scent. Dogs have lived alongside humans for at least 15,000 years, possibly much longer. In that time, they have become remarkably attuned to human behavior. They follow our gaze, looking where we look. They respond to our pointing gestures, understanding that a pointed finger indicates something of interest. They read our facial expressions, distinguishing happy faces from angry ones. In some ways, dogs may understand human social signals better than our closest primate relatives do. We have spent much of our journey considering what goes on inside the minds of animals, trying to understand their thoughts and feelings, their perceptions and experiences. But there is another question, equally fascinating and perhaps even more humbling. What do animals think of us? When a dog looks at its owner, when a crow watches a human walk by, when a whale surfaces near a boat full of tourists, what are they perceiving? What are they thinking? To begin to answer this question, we must first understand that animals do not perceive the world the same way we do. Each species has evolved sensory systems tuned to its particular needs, its ecological niche, its way of life. The world as experienced by a dog or a bee or an eagle is profoundly different from the world as experienced by a human. Dogs, for example, live in a world dominated by smell. Their noses contain up to 300 million olfactory receptors, compared to our mere 6 million. The part of their brain devoted to analyzing smells is proportionally 40 times greater than ours. When a dog meets you, it is not primarily seeing you. It is reading your chemical signature, detecting where you have been, what you have eaten, perhaps even how you are feeling. You are, to a dog, a walking autobiography written in scent. Dogs have lived alongside humans for at least 15,000 years, possibly much longer. In that time, they have become remarkably attuned to human behavior. They follow our gaze, looking where we look. They respond to our pointing gestures, understanding that a pointed finger indicates something of interest. They read our facial expressions, distinguishing happy faces from angry ones. In some ways, dogs may understand human social signals better than our closest primate relatives do. This feline perspective may explain the famous independence of cats, their willingness to ignore commands, their tendency to treat their humans as equals rather than masters. A cat's meow, interestingly, is largely a vocalization developed for communicating with humans. Adult cats rarely meow at each other. They reserve this sound for their human companions, having learned that it gets our attention. As you rest quietly, imagine being observed by the animals around you. To your dog, you are a beloved companion whose scent tells stories. To the crows outside your window, you are a specific individual, perhaps friendly, perhaps to be watched with caution. To your cat, you are a fellow creature, somewhat puzzling but tolerable. We think of ourselves as the observers, the ones who study and classify and understand. But we are also the observed, interpreted through senses and minds utterly unlike our own. Throughout history, humans have dreamed of talking with animals. It is one of the oldest fantasies in our mythologies, from the stories of Solomon speaking with beasts to the modern tales of Dr. Dolittle. What secrets might animals share if only we could understand them? What would we learn about the world, about ourselves, about the nature of mind? In the 20th and 21st centuries, scientists have attempted to make this dream a reality. We have already met some of the pioneers of this effort. The researchers who taught sign language to Washoe and Coco, who worked with Alex the parrot, who communicated with Kanzi the bonobo through symbols. These projects revealed that at least some animals could learn to use symbols to express desires, label objects, and perhaps even discuss abstract concepts. But they also revealed the enormous challenges of true interspecies communication. One fundamental problem is that human language is unlike any animal communication system yet discovered. Human language is productive. We can combine a finite set of words according to grammatical rules to create an infinite variety of sentences, including sentences never before spoken. It is also displaced. We can talk about things that are not present, events that happened in the past or might happen in the future, places we have never been and beings we have never met. Animal communication systems, while often sophisticated, generally lack these features. The waggle dance of bees is displaced, referring to food sources the dancing bee has left behind. But it is not productive. Bees cannot combine dance elements in new ways to express novel meanings. Vervet monkey alarm calls distinguish between different predators, but they are fixed signals, not combinable units. Even the symbol use of trained apes, impressive as it is, rarely displays the generative creativity of human language. Throughout history, humans have dreamed of talking with animals. It is one of the oldest fantasies in our mythologies, from the stories of Solomon speaking with beasts to the modern tales of Dr. Dolittle. What secrets might animals share if only we could understand them? What would we learn about the world, about ourselves, about the nature of mind? In the 20th and 21st centuries, scientists have attempted to make this dream a reality. We have already met some of the pioneers of this effort. The researchers who taught sign language to Washoe and Coco, who worked with Alex the parrot, who communicated with Kanzi the bonobo through symbols. These projects revealed that at least some animals could learn to use symbols to express desires, label objects, and perhaps even discuss abstract concepts. But they also revealed the enormous challenges of true interspecies communication. One fundamental problem is that human language is unlike any animal communication system yet discovered. Human language is productive. We can combine a finite set of words according to grammatical rules to create an infinite variety of sentences, including sentences never before spoken. It is also displaced. We can talk about things that are not present, events that happened in the past or might happen in the future, places we have never been and beings we have never met. Animal communication systems, while often sophisticated, generally lack these features. The waggle dance of bees is displaced, referring to food sources the dancing bee has left behind. But it is not productive. Bees cannot combine dance elements in new ways to express novel meanings. Vervet monkey alarm calls distinguish between different predators, but they are fixed signals, not combinable units. Even the symbol use of trained apes, impressive as it is, rarely displays the generative creativity of human language. Slobodchikov believes that prairie dog communication approaches something like language, with elements that can be combined to create new meanings. He has worked on developing software that might eventually translate prairie dog calls into English and human words back into prairie dog calls. True conversation with a rodent may sound like science fiction, but the research continues. Dolphins have long fascinated researchers with their complex vocalizations. Each dolphin develops a signature whistle that functions like a name, and dolphins use each other's whistles to call specific individuals. Researchers have created artificial whistles that dolphins can learn to associate with objects or actions, establishing a shared vocabulary. In experiments, dolphins have demonstrated that they understand syntax. They know that bring the ball to the hoop means something different from bring the hoop to the ball. More recently, researchers have begun using artificial intelligence to analyze animal communication. Machine learning algorithms can detect patterns in animal vocalizations that human ears cannot perceive. Projects are underway to decode the meaning of whale songs, the chirps of bats, the rumbles of elephants. We may be on the verge of technological breakthroughs that could open new windows into animal minds. Perhaps the deepest communication between humans and animals happens not through words or symbols, but through shared experiences and emotional attunement. When you sit quietly with a dog, when you move gently around a horse, when you make slow eye contact with a gorilla, something is being communicated that transcends language. Presence, intention, feeling. These cross the species barrier in ways that words cannot fully capture. In these moments of connection, the gap between minds grows smaller, and we glimpse the possibility of true understanding. Throughout our journey tonight, we have traced the history of how humans have understood animal minds. From the animism of our ancestors to the mechanistic views of Descartes, from Darwin's evolutionary insights to the cognitive revolution of the 20th century, our understanding has evolved. And with that evolution has come a gradual transformation in how we relate to other animals. For most of human history, the relationship between humans and other animals was one of practical necessity. Animals were food, clothing, transportation, labor, and companionship. We hunted them, herded them, trained them, and lived alongside them. Our lives were intertwined in ways that modern urban dwellers can barely imagine. A farmer knew her animals as individuals, relied on them, and perhaps felt genuine affection for them, even as she raised them for slaughter. But there was also a conceptual distance. Humans were made in the image of God, or were uniquely rational, or were the pinnacle of creation. Animals existed below us in the great chain of being, their purpose defined by their usefulness to human ends. This hierarchy was not questioned for most of history because it seemed so obviously true. Humans built cities, wrote books, developed technologies that no other species could match. Of course we were different. Of course we were superior. Darwin's theory of evolution undermined this hierarchy fundamentally. If humans evolved from other animals, if we share ancestors with apes and, more distantly, with every living thing, then the sharp line between human and animal begins to blur. We are not a separate creation but part of a continuous family tree. This insight took generations to sink in, and its implications are still being worked out today. The animal welfare movement, which began in earnest in the 19th century, represented one response to this new understanding. Reformers argued that if animals could suffer, then we had a duty to minimize their suffering. They campaigned against practices like vivisection, bear baiting, and the abuse of working animals. They established societies for the prevention of cruelty and pushed for legal protections. Their efforts did not end human use of animals, but they established the principle that animals' experiences mattered morally. In the 20th and 21st centuries, the movement has grown more radical. Philosophers like Peter Singer and Tom Regan have argued that many of our traditional uses of animals are morally unjustifiable. If animals have interests, if they can suffer, experience pleasure, form relationships, and value their own lives, then those interests deserve moral consideration. We cannot simply use animals as resources, ignoring their welfare for our convenience. These arguments have had practical effects. Factory farming practices that were once hidden from public view are now subject to intense scrutiny. Laws protecting endangered species have saved many creatures from extinction. Great apes have been granted legal rights in some countries, recognizing them as persons in a limited sense. Cetaceans, elephants, and other cognitively complex animals are increasingly seen as deserving of special protection. Perhaps most profoundly, our relationship with companion animals has deepened. Dogs and cats are no longer mere pets. They are family members, with their own veterinary specialists, therapists, and even grief counselors. We spend billions of dollars on their care, celebrate their birthdays, and mourn their deaths with genuine grief. In these relationships, the old hierarchy has largely dissolved. We love these animals, and we believe they love us back. The journey is far from complete. Billions of animals still suffer in factory farms, in laboratories, in the shrinking wild spaces of a crowded world. Many people still see animals as fundamentally different from humans, as resources to be used rather than beings to be respected. The tension between our growing understanding of animal minds and our continued exploitation of animal bodies is one of the great unresolved moral questions of our time. But the direction of travel is clear. As we learn more about what animals think and feel, our circle of moral concern expands. The sharp line between human and animal fades, replaced by a spectrum of consciousness, a family of minds. We are moving, slowly and unevenly, from a relationship of dominion to one of kinship. This may be one of the most important transformations in human history. We have traveled far tonight, through time and across species, exploring the vast landscape of animal minds. We have seen how human understanding has evolved from ancient animism through Cartesian mechanism to modern cognitive science. We have met remarkable creatures and the dedicated researchers who study them. But our journey is not ending. In many ways, it is just beginning. The study of animal minds is entering a new golden age, and the discoveries ahead may dwarf everything we have learned so far. New technologies are opening windows into animal cognition that previous generations could only dream of. Miniaturized sensors can now be attached to wild animals, tracking not just their movements but their physiological states. Heart rate, body temperature, stress hormones. We can follow individual animals through their entire lives, understanding their decisions and experiences in unprecedented detail. Neural recording devices have become smaller and less invasive, allowing researchers to monitor brain activity in freely moving animals. We can watch neurons fire as a rat navigates a maze, as a monkey makes a choice, as a bird sings its song. These recordings reveal the neural code underlying thought and behavior, the biological language of the mind. Perhaps most exciting is the application of artificial intelligence to the study of animal communication. Machine learning algorithms can analyze vast amounts of data, detecting patterns that human researchers might miss. Projects are underway to decode the vocalizations of whales, the chemical signals of ants, the dances of bees. We may soon have translation tools for species whose languages we barely knew existed. The Earth Species Project, founded in 2017, aims to use artificial intelligence to decode non-human communication and ultimately to enable two-way communication between humans and other species. Their researchers are applying techniques originally developed for translating human languages to the challenge of understanding animal signals. If they succeed even partially, the implications would be profound. Genetic technologies are also transforming our understanding of animal minds. By comparing the genomes of different species, we can identify genes associated with cognitive abilities and trace their evolutionary history. We are learning which genetic changes allowed certain lineages to develop larger brains, more complex social behaviors, or unusual problem-solving abilities. The molecular basis of mind is slowly coming into focus. Meanwhile, the field of animal cognition itself is expanding in new directions. Researchers are studying species that were long ignored: fish, reptiles, invertebrates. They are discovering cognitive abilities in unexpected places, from the spatial memory of jumping spiders to the social learning of stingrays. Every new discovery suggests that the distribution of mind in nature is broader and more varied than we assumed. There is growing interest in animal emotions and subjective experience, questions that were once considered too difficult or unscientific to study. Researchers are developing methods to assess animal welfare objectively, measuring not just physical health but psychological well-being. We are learning to ask not just what animals do but how they feel. The questions we will answer in the coming decades are remarkable to contemplate. Do fish feel pain in the way mammals do? Can insects experience something like pleasure? Do octopuses dream? How much do great apes understand about death? What do whales discuss in their long, complex songs? We stand at the threshold of discoveries that could reshape our understanding of consciousness, of nature, and of our place in the living world. As you rest here, know that the exploration continues. In laboratories and field stations around the world, researchers are working through the night, watching, recording, analyzing. Every day brings new data, new insights, new questions. The minds of animals, so long mysterious, are slowly yielding their secrets. And what we are learning is more wonderful than anyone imagined. As we approach the end of our journey, let us step back from the details of experiments and brain scans, from neurons and behaviors, and consider what it all means. What does the study of animal minds tell us about the universe we live in, about consciousness, about ourselves? Perhaps the most profound lesson is that mind is not rare. For centuries, Western thought assumed that consciousness was a uniquely human possession, a divine gift or an evolutionary accident that set us apart from all other creatures. The more we learn, the more this assumption crumbles. Mind, in some form, appears to be woven through the fabric of animal life. This does not mean that all minds are the same. Human consciousness, with its language, its abstract reasoning, its capacity for scientific inquiry and artistic creation, is genuinely remarkable. We are, as far as we know, the only species that asks questions about consciousness, the only species that studies other species, the only species that creates stories and shares them across generations. These abilities set us apart. But we are not as alone as we once thought. The gap between human and animal minds is not a chasm but a spectrum. We shade into the great apes, who share so much of our cognition and emotion. They shade into other primates, who shade into other mammals, who shade into birds and reptiles and fish and beyond. Consciousness did not appear suddenly with humans. It evolved gradually, over hundreds of millions of years, taking different forms in different lineages. This realization invites a kind of cosmic humility. We are not the sole bearers of awareness in a universe of dead matter. We are part of a vast community of experiencing beings, each perceiving the world in its own way, each with its own perspective on existence. The universe is not cold and empty. It is thick with minds, rich with experience. There is also a kind of kinship in this recognition. When you look at another creature, you are looking at a relative, a cousin who shares with you the great inheritance of life. Your last common ancestor with a chimpanzee lived perhaps 7 million years ago. Your last common ancestor with a dog lived perhaps 100 million years ago. Your last common ancestor with an octopus lived over 600 million years ago. But you do have a common ancestor. You are family. And family, as we know, comes with responsibilities. If other animals can think and feel, if they have experiences that matter to them, then we cannot treat them as mere objects. Their lives have value, independent of their usefulness to us. Their suffering is real suffering. Their joys are real joys. How we treat them reflects on who we are. This does not mean that the answers to ethical questions about animals are simple. Humans will continue to rely on animals in various ways, and navigating the balance between human needs and animal welfare is genuinely difficult. But the conversation has changed. We can no longer pretend that animals are machines without inner lives. We must face the moral weight of their experience. Perhaps the deepest wonder of all is simply this, that the universe has produced beings capable of wondering. Somehow, out of hydrogen and helium, out of nuclear fusion in the hearts of stars, out of the slow accumulation of elements and molecules in cells, consciousness has emerged. Minds exist. Experience exists. The cosmos has developed the ability to know itself. We do not know how common this is in the universe. Perhaps life and mind are rare, precious sparks in an immense darkness. Perhaps they are everywhere on countless worlds around countless stars. We do not yet know. But here, on this small blue planet, mind has blossomed in a million forms. And the study of animal minds is, in the end, the study of this great mystery. How matter becomes aware, how the universe learns to experience itself. And so we come to the end of our journey through the minds of animals. We have traveled far together, through time and across species, through laboratories and wild places, through philosophy and science and wonder. Now, as the night deepens around you, let yourself rest in what we have discovered. Let your breathing slow. Let your muscles soften. Let the weight of the day fall away from you, like leaves drifting from an autumn tree. Somewhere, right now, a dog is dreaming beside its sleeping family, its paws twitching as it runs through meadows of the mind. A whale is singing in the deep ocean, its song echoing for miles through the dark water. A crow is settling onto its roost, tucking its head beneath its wing, its clever brain quieting for the night. An octopus is changing colors in its sleep, perhaps dreaming dreams we cannot imagine. You are part of this community of sleeping creatures, this family of minds. As you drift towards sleep yourself, you join a tradition as old as life, the nightly surrender to unconsciousness that knits up the revealed sleeve of care. Animals have slept for hundreds of millions of years. You are continuing something ancient, something shared. Think of the creatures we have met tonight. The chimpanzees who plan and grieve. The elephants who mourn their dead and recognize their own reflections. The dolphins who call each other by name. The crows who remember faces and solve puzzles and hold grudges. The octopuses who dream in colors we cannot see. The bees who dance their directions to flowers. The rats who laugh when they are tickled. Each of these creatures has its own experience of being alive, its own perspective on existence. Each is the center of its own universe, just as you are the center of yours. The world is full of perspectives, full of experiences, full of minds. It is a richer, stranger, more wonderful place than we can easily comprehend. And so we come to the end of our journey through the minds of animals. We have traveled far together, through time and across species, through laboratories and wild places, through philosophy and science and wonder. Now, as the night deepens around you, let yourself rest in what we have discovered. Let your breathing slow. Let your muscles soften. Let the weight of the day fall away from you, like leaves drifting from an autumn tree. Somewhere, right now, a dog is dreaming beside its sleeping family, its paws twitching as it runs through meadows of the mind. A whale is singing in the deep ocean, its song echoing for miles through the dark water. A crow is settling onto its roost, tucking its head beneath its wing, its clever brain quieting for the night. An octopus is changing colors in its sleep, perhaps dreaming dreams we cannot imagine. You are part of this community of sleeping creatures, this family of minds. As you drift toward sleep yourself, you join a tradition as old as life, the nightly surrender to unconsciousness that knits up the revealed sleeve of care. Animals have slept for hundreds of millions of years. You are continuing something ancient, something shared. Think of the creatures we have met tonight. The chimpanzees who plan and grieve. The elephants who mourn their dead and recognize their own reflections. The dolphins who call each other by name. The crows who remember faces and solve puzzles and hold grudges. The octopuses who dream in colors we cannot see. The bees who dance their directions to flowers. The rats who laugh when they are tickled. Each of these creatures has its own experience of being alive, its own perspective on existence. Each is the center of its own universe, just as you are the center of yours. The world is full of perspectives, full of experiences, full of minds. It is a richer, stranger, more wonderful place than we can easily comprehend. And you are here in this moment aware of all this. You are one of the universe's ways of knowing itself. Your consciousness, flickering now toward sleep, is part of the great mystery of awareness, the light that shines in the darkness of mere matter. This is precious. This is rare. This is worth cherishing. Tomorrow, when you wake, you will see the world with new eyes. You will notice the dog who passes on the street and wonder what it smells, what it thinks, what it feels. You will hear the birds singing and wonder what they are saying to each other. You will look at the creatures around you and see not just animals, but fellow travelers on this strange journey of existence. But that is for tomorrow. For now, let yourself rest. Let the stories we have shared become dreams. Let the wonder we have explored become peace. The night is deep and quiet. The world is full of sleeping minds. And you, dear listener, are one of them. Close your eyes. Breathe slowly. Let go. Sleep now. Dream of whales singing in moonlit oceans. Dream of elephants walking across ancient savannas beneath countless stars. Dream of crows flying through forests at dawn. Dream of the vast community of minds, all resting now, all dreaming now, all part of this great mystery of consciousness. Good night, dear listener. Good night. And thank you for joining us on this journey through the minds of animals.